Governor Bryan and I co-chair the Community Investment Task Force session on cultivating the future, how the Farm Bill authorizes essential tools for rural America in the 21st century. I'm Idaho Governor Brad Little, and Governor Albert Bryan of the U.S. Virgin Islands and I co-chair this task force. I'd like to thank our fellow governors, Governor Polis, Governor Kotek, and Governor Evers for being here and joining us today. And I'd also like to thank USDA Undersecretary Jennifer Moffett and NASDA, or all the state ag departments, CEO Ted McKinney, for joining us today. As governor of Idaho, like most agricultural states, obviously supporting agriculture is a very high priority for me and for the state of Idaho. One of the things I used to tell in my previous life, before I was elected official, but when I talked to my ag friends, is change is inevitable, adaptation and survival are optional. Now, when I got into government, I found out government always survives compared to agriculture. But what agriculture's done over the 250 years since this country started has been nothing short of incredible. And it's state ag departments, and an enormous amount of it is the help that we've had from USDA through our land grant institutions. It's that adapting to change that's made agriculture in America the envy of the world. In Idaho, we've made recently significant investments in water. Idaho consumes more water per capita than any other state in the nation except Nebraska, because most of our agriculture, at least in the southern part of the state, relies on irrigation. So as a result, when we invest in water, it's not only for municipalities, but a lot of it's for agriculture. Obviously, all the states, we've all made investments in transportation. Lately, there's federal infrastructure dollars, but then a lot of the states have also upped their game so that we can cope with growth. But you got to have roads to get commodities to the markets and have the capacity. And always we're working on rural development in a lot of different ways. Just briefly, Ted and I were talking. We had a challenge in Idaho where, and I know Governor Polis had it, where we had an invasive quagga mussel invasion. We had it right in the middle of the Snake River, and the Snake River is the water that goes into both Oregon and Washington. And my ag director, who Ted knows, she was down there in her tent and a bedroll down there at night doing the treatment we needed to do. Now, there's never any wood at these places. But we think we've got ahead of it. But the challenges that we have in agriculture, besides climate change, are a lot of invasive species. And we think we've got ahead of that. And I will, some of the other things we're doing in Idaho that I will also maybe have Ted or Jennifer address is what we're doing on trade, expanding markets for our agricultural commodities, and basically doing what's probably the best thing to do for rural development, and that's make farming profitable. Whenever I visit with my ag groups, I always say, we might grow a potato or two in Idaho. But whether it's potatoes or barley or cheese or cattle, the most important product that we raise in Idaho are young farmers and ranchers. And that's, as farms aggregate, as farms get bigger, as farms get more sophisticated, the number of people living on the land just gets smaller and smaller. That's why Ted and I were talking to Governor Bryan about the FFA program that's available, which is a huge part of incentivizing leadership and knowledge about agricultural production, as are the 4-H programs. And those are great cultivators of young farmers and ranchers as we go forward. One of the things last year when we chaired it, the task force, I briefly talked about a year ago in this, well, not this room, but whatever room we were in. But I talked about a new proposal that we just proposed in Idaho, which is basically career technical funding for all our kids. We heard yesterday, I guess it was the White House, we were talking, maybe it was First Lady, and she was talking about the go-on rate. And many states, 40 out of 100 high school kids will go on and graduate, but the other 60 have been a challenge. So we proposed a year ago, and I don't need to knock on wood. I got it through the appropriations process this week. We've got a program where 55% of my high school seniors have signed up for a program. That's going to be over and above people going on to the military, people that have got, great grades or a family support system. So we're going to move the needle from 37% go-on rate, we hope, to 60% with this program that makes up to $8,000 available for any in-demand career, which is what we heard about yesterday, whether it's a plumber or electrician. How many people in the room are lawyers? I can't help myself. I told the story about the attorney that's working, the phone rings, and it's his wife, and dear, the plumbing is backed up in the basement. And he says, well, I got to finish this job. Call Joe the plumber. So he hustles through with his work and races home, and Joe the plumber's coming out the basement. He's cleaning his tools and filling out his bill, and he gives in the bill, and it's $450. And he says, $450? That's $225 an hour. That's what I charge as a lawyer. And the plumber goes, yeah, that's what I charged when I was a lawyer also. So there are other career paths, and a lot of them are directly related to rural development that we can use in this country. And I was excited to hear yesterday what's taken place. We governors are the laboratories where and full disclosure, when I went to school at the University of Idaho, my tuition was $145 a semester. And right now, going on affordability is a real problem. So there's a lot of states that are doing a lot of different things. I hope this committee can serve as a place to where we can talk about that going forward. And the other thing is maybe get an update on the Farm Bill. For Idaho, the Farm Bill, there's a forestry part of it that's really important to forest health, whether you, in your communities or in your states, whether you have forest or not. I know everybody's getting more than mildly concerned about the smoke issue that frankly goes all around the world. And the more we can do on forest health, the more we can help with those big catastrophic fires and to help us adapt to that change that exists. So, Governor Bryan, take it away.
Thank you, Governor Little, and thank you everyone for coming today in attendance, especially our special guests, as well as our governors. Now you might be saying, what does the Virgin Islands have to do with agriculture? Well, we are a small place, and the beautiful thing about it is when you live in a very small place, everything happens quickly, and you actually get to see a microcosm of what's happening in greater America. And we're no different. We have made a goal for 2040 to move our food production from 3%, growing 3% of everything we eat, to moving it to 35%. Now, the Virgin Islands, the entire Virgin Islands is considered rural America. You wouldn't think about that. I haven't seen a silo there for as long as I lived, but it is rural America. And we are very agrarian people. I come from a family where planting is a way of life. Getting back there, however, has been difficult. Just like everybody else, I was just talking to Ted about getting a FFA chapter there. Kids stay inside now. We have all kinds of threats, and we live them every single day. We had, as climate change continues in the world, we feel it especially harshly. We had 2 Category 5 hurricanes within a month of one another. So imagine getting slammed and then getting slammed again. Then came COVID, and then came 2 years of extreme drought. So our farmers are under extreme pressure in trying to make a living in the Virgin Islands. And you may ask, why is it so important that you move your food production from 3 to 35%? Just to get a kind of idea of how expensive it is to live in the beautiful, what we call it, America's paradise. A bucket of chicken at home is $55. Think about that.
Is it better chicken?
We don't eat it. We can't afford it. The tourists eat it. But we want to make sure that we move along this continuum. But to do that, we need the help of the Department of Agriculture and the Farm Bill that's coming up. One of the things that is particularly notable is that the Virgin Islands is not covered by crop insurance. So our farmers are really at risk. So whenever we have extreme conditions, when we have, their crops are not covered. But what we do get is when is a declaration like a hurricane or extreme drought, we get covered. So part of this is about inclusiveness, remembering that the territories are part of America, they're your America, and giving us the opportunity to be included. We've had an extensive discussion at home about how do we bring farming back, and a lot of that is based on technology. Currently, we're working on aquaponics projects. The University of the Virgin Islands is one of the premier places in the world for aquaponics. However, there are no aquaponics farms in the Virgin Islands. So while people come from all over the world to get that experience, we don't have it in production. So what we did is we set up about 60,000 square feet of green space to start off aquaponics. And why is aquaponics so important? In a place where there's not a lot of space, and it is pretty mountainous compared to most places in rural America, space is important. With a 2,000 square foot greenhouse, you can produce enough fish and enough produce to support a family. Now, a 2,000 square foot greenhouse fits on about a quarter acre of land. So it's not only good job development, but it's actually good agricultural practices. It also conserves water. Just like Idaho, we have a lot of water issues. So we're using our resources that we have now to be able to create storage facilities, to be more wells, and better ways of irrigation for our farmers. Forestry is also important to us. St. Croix as an island has been totally deforested twice in the history of the islands. When the Danes had it, they cut down all of the trees in order to make room for sugarcane plantations. So on about 85 square miles, we have 300 sugar mills on that. And that's historically when we were a place of the breadbasket of the Caribbean. We'll never be back to that place where we have agriculture leading in such a way, but we only can get back if everybody participates. So not only do we need our support for our ranchers and our farmers, but for our young people, getting them back to the soil and understanding that this is a part of living. I have a friend that majored in agriculture and husbandry, and he always challenged me to ask me, name one thing that you use that's not connected to agriculture. So today, I'm really excited about being on this panel and having a chance to hear what we're going to hear from the Farm Bill that's coming up and how all of us can benefit from that. So first up, we have the Honorable Jennifer Lester Moffett, who serves as the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at the United States Department of Agriculture. Prior to joining the USDA, Undersecretary Moffett championed the work of farmers and producers in California, where she served as Undersecretary and Deputy Secretary at the California Department of Agriculture. A fifth-generation Californian, Undersecretary Moffett grew up on her family's walnut farm and processing operation. On the family farm, Undersecretary Moffett worked to expand the family business access to domestic, international markets while implementing the climate-smart agriculture practices. The funny thing is like people who've come from California, I didn't realize it's even fifth generations. You always try to identify what their accent sounds like, right? Like you listen to me, you could tell I'm from the Caribbean, right? No? I sound like I'm from Alaska? Anyway, thank you, Undersecretary Moffett, for joining us, and I'll allow you to get some remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Governor Bryan and Governor Little, for having me here today to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing at the department. As I was mentioning to you earlier, we just had some of our team actually in the Virgin Islands this week meeting with the Department of Agriculture to really it's interesting to me to hear that you have this goal of 35%, is it 35% of local production? Because that is exactly what our team was working on. We're building regional food business centers around the nation, and we have an island and remote areas regional food business centers that was convening to talk about the unique nature of islands and building, strengthening local agriculture to be able to feed the communities on which the island that they're living. And I'll just start off by saying, Governor Little, particularly as you talk about things like invasive snails and invasive pests, my title, Marketing and Regulatory Programs, is a little nebulous in what does that mean. I have the agricultural marketing services as well as the animal plant health inspection services under my portfolio. So invasive pests, of course, also animal health issues are things that I work on each and every day with our team at APHIS. You talked about the resilience in agriculture, Governor Little, and I want to talk a little bit about that resilience in agriculture. We have been, as the United States, in agriculture at several different pivotal moments across our time as a nation. Certainly when President Lincoln established the Department of Agriculture, certainly another big pivotal moment was back in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era, where we established many conservation programs as well as many disaster relief programs that were really important and critical for producers during that time. We're at yet another pivotal moment. We saw how rich our agriculture is, but also how deep our agriculture is in supply chain constraints. At the beginning of the pandemic, we certainly experienced that also with international shipping issues. We experience it now also as with war on Ukraine, and the list goes on. We're at this pivotal moment right now where we're really looking at agriculture and how do we expand and build more resilience? How do we sustain ag prosperity and revitalize rural America? And there's a really great opportunity to do that. But I'll first start with kind of a more of a sad tone, which is since 1981, we just released our Census of Agriculture 2 weeks ago. Since 1981, we have lost over 500,000 farmers and ranchers across the nation. 500,000 farmers and ranchers just in my lifetime. We've also lost 165 million acres of agricultural land at the same time. At the same time, our farm income, we have 7% of our farmers who are capturing 85% of the farm income. The remaining 93% are sharing that 15% of farm income. Oftentimes, those farmers are supplementing their farm income with off-farm jobs, just like my family does. My mom works off-farm to be able to supplement the income on my family's farm. That is happening across 93% of our family farming operations. So we've really been focused at USDA on how do we not just increase farmer income, but farm income, increase opportunities for farms to have more new and better revenue streams, increasing better markets for farmers, increasing value add opportunities. This can include things like climate smart agriculture and forestry commodities. So not just bringing in revenue on the food, fiber feed that is being produced on the farm, but also looking at the ecosystem services, the types of services that the farmers are producing. You talked about soil health, and that is one where farmers can get additional payments for the other services that are being brought onto the farm. Bioproduct manufacturing is another big example of the work that we're doing to increase revenue opportunities on family farming operations. Things like sustainable aviation fuel, things like bringing value from what traditionally had been a waste product in agriculture, adding new value propositions back to the farm so that farmers and families can stay on the farm and so that rural America can thrive. We've been working on renewable energy, which helps reduce costs for farmers. It also can provide new revenue streams again as well. We've been investing in processing and distribution, and this one we've been very much in partnership with states and with your state departments of agriculture. We have right now a resilient food system infrastructure program. This is over $400 million in funds that we have through the American Rescue Plan that your state departments of agriculture right now are administering to increase what we call the middle of the food supply chain, which can be processing, it can be aggregation, it can be food hubs, it could be distribution. What are the needs in your state to be able to build and strengthen a more resilient food system, a place where farmers have more opportunities, more choices in the market to bring their product to process, bring their product to different markets, whether that is farm to school markets, whether that is farm to hospital markets, whether that is farm to retail and grocery and restaurant markets. All of those different market opportunities is a key part of that. We're also investing in fertilizer production. We've been able to use some of the funds from the Commodity Credit Corporation to invest in domestic fertilizer production, something that we saw acutely, and our farmers across the nation saw acutely as we've been dependent more and more on imported fertilizer production, the need to also have domestic fertilizer production capacity here in the United States. We're also working on strengthening local and regional food systems. And that is not just about building and strengthening, of course, farmers' opportunity to do direct sale through farmers markets and CSA boxes and those sorts of things, but also looking at the food shed capacity. So ranchers coming together to say, hey, we've got all these different opportunities. We're all producing in the same region. Let's look at how we can come together and do combined processing to meet the economies of scale that are needed to really get product to market. And we're very focused on how we at USDA and how our partners and how your states are working on purchasing food for our school meal program. Of course, we do a lot of purchases as well for the food bank system, strengthening the relationship between schools and local farmers to be able to procure more and buy more from local producers. I was in Arkansas last month meeting with a group of producers who are selling to farm to school in that region through some of the funding that we've been able to do through our local Foods for Schools program, and heard from several ranchers about how they were at the brink of bankruptcy, how they had lost their processing opportunity, and they had lost their market opportunity at the beginning of COVID when the meat supply chain had a lot of bumps along the way. And what I heard from them is now, 4 years later, they're now selling their beef into the local schools. And that farmer who was not thinking he was going to be there next year on his land and supporting his 6 kids who are also farming on the land, now is beamed with joy. He absolutely beamed with joy as he talked about going to the grocery store with his wife and having kids come and pull their parent to him and say, hey, this is the guy who's raising the food for my hamburgers for my school lunch. So to go from not seeing a future to now being this pride and joy is just an incredible thing. This is about preserving markets and jobs and income for rural America and Americans. We have been advancing in so many different avenues as we build on a resilient food system. It's about diversification. And so we've been able to tap, again, also the Commodity Credit Corporation to be able to expand trade market access through a program called the Regional Ag Promotion Program, $1 billion there to be able to really diversify markets for producers abroad as well. All of these things, of course, work together. There is Farm Bill funding that we're certainly talking about today and the future of the Farm Bill and what is being discussed through Congress with the Farm Bill. There's also discretionary appropriations that are very important to how we operate at USDA, making sure we've got the staff available to serve farmers across America. There's the Commodity Credit Corporation and the flexibility that the Secretary has there to do things like build local markets and build international markets. And then, of course, there's also programs like the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that have been really important to the work that we're doing on conservation, on climate, on forestry health, building more resilient forestries as well. All of these things together are what we call the four-legged stool and are really about the work that we're doing at USDA in the Biden-Harris administration, sustaining ag prosperity, because when we sustain ag prosperity, we sustain rural prosperity, and we also sustain and make sure that all of us have really great food security and nutrition security is a big part of the work that we're doing as well. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot. And I mean, it's interesting how the administration is weaving together things, whether it's climate change through forest supporting that, energy, renewables, because farms need energy as well too. We have some great challenges with that, so thank you for that. Next, we have Ted McKinney, he serves as the CEO of the National Association for the State Departments of Agriculture, or NASDA. It's a nonpartisan association working to influence policy that is beneficial for all regions, peoples, and environments, speaking on behalf of states and the territories. Prior to joining NASDA, Mr. McKinney was the first U.S. Department of Agriculture Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, where he served during the Trump administration from 2017 to 2021. Mr. McKinney also served as Indiana's Secretary of Agriculture under the then Governor Mike Pence. Mr. McKinney, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Governor Bryan, Governor Little, and Governor Polis. We're very nice to meet and re-meet all of you. We're very proud to have your secretaries or directors or commissioners of ag as members of NASDA. I'd like to cover just a few things, and I think part of it involves about a 1-minute introduction or reintroduction as to who NASDA is. NASDA is about 107 years old. It was founded as agriculture across the U.S. grew, and there were needs that the states had from the federal government and vice versa, in reverse. So 107 years old, we are nonpartisan. We have as our members Democrats and Republicans, and at any given time that could be one or the other in the majority, but the great pride and joy we have is that you can go to any of our meetings and you cannot tell their political stripes. It's all about food and ag, and there's a common bond across agriculture, as I think you probably can appreciate. So we love the fact that we're all about ag, and the politics most times get set aside. The other thing that many people do not know is that we are co-regulators with the federal government. We're co-regulators with USDA. We work a lot with Undersecretary Moffitt and her colleagues in other aspects of USDA, with EPA, with FDA, and I think over time we'll be working with more of them. The reason that's important is that we are the closest agency promoting ag, farmer, rancher products and regulating them. And for far too often, there has not been a listening ear as to what the co-regulators closest to the farmer or the rancher think and know and believe. So our policy is we're going to be the first to applaud our federal colleagues, and we do. And there's many, many things that they do right. But when we see that running astray or politics maybe getting in the way too much, we will meet with them. It's not a letter to the editor. It's not an op-ed. We'll go meet with them and let them know how we feel. And so far, the relationships are good and growing. And I thought you'd want to know that, given these days of divisiveness. So that's NASDA. We have several divisions. Policy is where it all started, and it's still very much at the fore. And we have here our Senior Director of Policy, R.J. Carney, who just does a masterful job with a terrific team. I'll cover the 5 key #1 policy priorities in a moment. We also cover trade and trade policy. For 40 years, the MAP program that is administered by the Foreign Ag Service under the tutelage of Undersecretary Alexis Taylor of Oregon, formerly of Oregon, we've done that for many, many years since it's been around. And what you may not know is that MAP programs is a matching program where, let's just take commodity groups or NASDA or others. Commodity groups put up some money, it's matched by MAP funds, and then you can go place people around the world to lead trade for that commodity around the world. In our world, it is the departments of ag in all of your states that have direct, complete responsibility for the small and medium-sized businesses. So when I was in Indiana under Governor Pence and Governor Holcomb, we had a couple popcorn companies that wanted to go international. They did so, they're successful. A gummy bear company up near Chicago, albeit on the Indiana side, very active. And gosh, in all of our states, wines, distilled spirits, and the like is just exploding in its desire to go international. Those are the responsibility of state departments of ag. Now, that doesn't mean we don't like dairy, beef, pork, poultry, all the commodities. No. We love them. And we always represent them. But we sort of stand second in line there because the commodity groups do such a great job with them. So trade and trade policy. Now, Undersecretary Moffett mentioned MAP's been around for a long time. It's the granddaddy. But we are participating in the Emerging Markets Program as well, hence our trip to Cuba that I just got back from 2 days ago. And this regional program, the RAP program, we Aggies are now getting into the RAP business, unbelievable and so timely. It's been 25 years since there's been an increase in those trade promotion dollars. French wines get 6x what U.S. wines get. And we can find those kinds of comparisons all the way up and down the commodity list. So very grateful to the administration. Most of you know, and I think Undersecretary Moffett mentioned that the U.S. The Ag Census just came out this last week. Well, you may not know that all the enumerators that go out and collect that data from farmers and ranchers are our employees. So we may have 25, 26 core employees in Arlington across the river, but we have 25 to 2,800 at any given time enumerators who are employed by us through a partnership with the National Ag Statistics. We have a foundation that is growing exponentially because we can take that and all it does is education and outreach. And many people want to partner with the state departments of ag because we don't have a dog in any hunt. We support all of ag. And so, for example, when the Frozen Foods Institute was dealing with plastic, they wanted to do a survey. And we said, well, gosh, we're happy to do it. It might be a little self-serving if you did it. And so they came our way, and we've had some great success there. I should also say under the foundation are some of our largest programs. Many of you know the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. This was developed about 12 years ago to institute an inspection, an education system that gets at avoiding pathogens on produce. A few years later, they added feed. I'm speaking of animal feed, pet food. And so it is largely FDA and NASDA that work those programs, the training programs, but it's largely the states that go educate and then regulate on those. It's been a sideways movement. It has not been easy, but back to that candid conversation we and our members finally had. In fact, Celia was one of the leaders in breaking that open so that FDA finally said, okay, they really do know what they're talking about. And it couldn't be a better relationship right now, and we're very proud of that. We're working with EPA grants on water quality down the Mississippi River Valley, and USDA grants cover many things. The one thing I want to end on is international. 2 years ago when I was interviewing for this job, the board said, we think we should be doing more internationally. And I said, great, so long as we don't get into the negotiation business. That is for USDA and US trade reps, commerce, and others. And they said, fine, we still think there's a lot of room we can take. So our work in international has exploded. It is exploding. We've had 7 ministers of ag from foreign countries find their way to the NASDA office, and we're very proud to invite them in, but it was not a solicited interview. We didn't even know they were coming to Washington. But they've heard about this closest to the farmer co-regulator business, and so we're happy to do that. And we always keep our friends at USDA, state, and other places informed. It's seamless. We do not get in their space. We know our lane, but at the same time, we're serving as a leverage point, an echo chamber to the great things that we see going on at the federal level. Let me touch on our policy priorities, because that's what it gets to. Farm Bill is number 1, 2, and 3 priority. No surprise. We'll get to that in a moment. You should know that food safety is second. No surprise. We want to keep pathogens out of lettuce, out of produce, out of feed. It is critical. I think the trend line continues to be up. Funding is a big question. There's not the funding. Not complaining. We understand everybody has their hand out and needs those precious monies, but we're going to take what we get and do the very, very best with it. So food safety is the second. Labor reform, oh my goodness. Those of you that know your farmers and ranchers know that we are desperate for more labor. It has always tended to focus on the H-2A, H-2B programs, bring in guest workers. And there are parts of that that are very successful. I'm speaking of temporary workers. That's working, most cases, okay. They can get those workers. But the poor dairy farmer and pork farmer are left out because it's a seasonal worker. there is no provision for them to be there year-round and work on farms. And so the dairy farmers, and in many cases pork farmers, are suffering mightily. They simply cannot find the workers. Jenny, there's a difference, and even our Democrats are opposed to this. The changes in the labor standards are draconian. It seems like you have to go through a union to get there, and that adds a lot of cost and a lot of regulation that doesn't need to be there. And right now, some of the Department of Labor proposed regs, we're trying to get this, say that the jobs have to be specific based on salary. For example, if you are picking apples, you get a wage. If you are driving a truck, you get a wage. If that truck driver goes and picks any apples, which on a farm you find yourself doing all kinds of work, everybody picking apples gets the new higher wage. And so our farmers don't know what to do. They cannot afford. The wage rates have gone up now 3 times. And so many are just saying, I cannot afford to go get H-2A, H-2B workers, even though there is a lot of money to do that. We're working hard, and I'll lead by our Democrat members are leading hard to get this changed. And finally, pesticide regulations. We know the NGO activists are out there, but people clearly do not understand the value of pesticides. On our own farm, on my own farm, my twin brother manages all the farms in Indiana, we've been no-tilling for 20 years. The reason we can do that is because over-the-top products. I no longer see brown snow in the side ditches because of wind erosion. We no longer have to take excavators and dig out ditches from sedimentation from runoff. That is only because of certain select pesticides. And yet there's a drive to just ban all of these. And that's something the EU is pursuing as well. So we have got to stay very, very focused on allowing all the toolbox to remain. If we have to pare back some regulations or some uses, fine. But there is an onslaught of that. And I would also say, and I understand this on the part of EPA, they are trying very hard to apply and comply with the Endangered Species Act. Everybody gets that. We want to protect endangered species. But folks, let me tell you what's going on. It's becoming the Endangered Farmer Act. You take away all the tools and it becomes the Endangered Farmers Act. So we want to be very, very careful there. And then I'll go back to international. We are keeping our word. We are not negotiating, but let me tell you, there are opportunities. China's poking into a lot of countries to add influence, and that includes our good friends in Central and South America. The Americas, getting poked at. And I bet you the same goes for our Caribbean island friends, Governor Bryan. That's not so bad. We'll trade fairly, but sometimes I think there's a lot of nefariousness going on in some of that work. So in our international, we'll continue that work as long as we have the funding. I'm going to stop there because I'd rather get to Q&A, but thrilled to be here and thrilled that our members support so many of you. Thank you, sir.
Governor Bryan, do you have a question?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a lot of information. It always makes me think about the collaboration, not only on our islands, but in the Caribbean as a whole, aggregating ag product. A guy often asked me, you live in America's paradise, you go to the beach every day, it's 85 degrees, blue sunny skies, where do you go on vacation? And I tell him we go to the supermarket on the mainland and to the farmer's market. And they go, why? I said, because, a bag of cherries is like $12 at home. And just being able to see all that food and different types of things to eat at such low prices. Well, the pandemic changed that, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys go to the grocery store often, but when I come up here, your prices are looking a lot like mine. And all of the disruptions in the system from the pandemic have still not smoothed out things. What do you think we could put in the Farm Bill that brings affordability back for people? I think everybody in the Virgin Islands should get food stamps as much as food costs but I even feel more for my seniors, for my people on fixed incomes, how they're going to afford to eat in the future. Any ideas on how this Farm Bill can connect farmers with people with farmers, and lower the cost of food in America?
Well, thank you for that question and for sharing the story of what it's like to be a food consumer in the Virgin Islands or in any other island territory or state. I think that is just wild and incredible that vacations are to a grocery store. But in the food system, as someone who works in the food system, in some ways I'm kind of like, yeah. Your question, though, I think is a really powerful one. In the 2018 Farm Bill, in the last Farm Bill, new umbrella suite of programs was formed called the Local Agriculture Marketing Program, LAMP. And it's a series of 4 different programs that are administered across 2 different agencies, the Agricultural Marketing Services as well as Rural Development at USDA. And these programs do a series of things. They can create and foster connectivity and community about how do we bring back and revitalize local food systems that have been lost or need some additional support. They can create a regional food plan, an action plan. They can do everything from agritourism to also identifying what land is available and what types of products should be grown to meet the needs of local consumers and grocery stores, retailers, and the like, schools. So I think that was one that was established through the 2018 Farm Bill that I think has certainly has been very valuable. We were able to supplement some of the funding through the American Rescue Plan for that program. Another thing we've done, and I mentioned it at the outset, is these regional food business centers. And these regional food business centers, we have 12 across the nation. And actually Oregon State is in partnership with Colorado State in the Rocky Mountain Regional Food Business Center. So every state is covered through these centers. There's 11 regions of the centers, and then there's a national tribal center. And these centers are all about fostering connectivity. They're all about providing technical assistance so producers can navigate the food supply chain. As someone who was a producer myself, who tried to sell into markets, it can be complex. What is the labeling requirements? Ted, you talked about food safety. What are the different avenues and aspects? You talked about, of course, broken down supply chains. How do we rebuild those supply chains? What's the infrastructure that's needed to do that? And so these business centers provide direct technical assistance. They provide application assistance to make sure that every farmer, even small farmers, can apply for and access federal or state funds. And they have in of themselves what's called business builder funds. So they can administer grants up to $100,000 for whatever is needed to access new supply chains. So that is one that we have built through the American Rescue Plan. There's a lot of opportunity to keep those going. And then I'll just finish also by saying there's so much power in how we buy, the demand that we create and how we buy and what we buy in our food system through what we call the TFAP program for the food, the money that we're purchasing food for food banks, through school meal programs. The power of those programs to be able to actually drive food supply chain change and resilience and to bring back some of those local supply chains that, Governor, you're talking about, I think is really powerful. And so we've been able to invest some funds both through one-time COVID dollars as well as through the CCC, the Commodity Credit Corporation, into that as well. So I think all of those things together, because it's a system.
It is a system, and one of the things I want to really commend the Department of Agriculture for is, the summer EBT program for kids that are on assisted lunch. That is so powerful. Yeah. I often worry, though, when you give people that live below the poverty line, it's not only an economic condition, it's a mental condition as well, too, how those dollars are being used. If we could figure out ways to do programs so we make sure those kids are eating and that food is not being diverted in a way to something else, because all kinds of things happen during the summer. Governor Little, any questions?
The other governor, Governor Evers, Governor Kotek?
I'll just mention a few things. And first of all, in Wisconsin, we have it. We own it on our license plates, America's Dairyland. And for a little information, the percentage of milk that is provided in Wisconsin, 90% of it goes into cheese, and which is a more sellable product, frankly. But we are hopeful that at some point in time, the dairy or the federal government will pass a farm bill. In the meantime, Wisconsin, we're a purple state, but dairy being so important, and frankly, agriculture being so important, we get good support from Republicans and Democrats on a whole number of issues. You know, this may sound small, but farmer mental health program is really, really important. And every year or every biennium, we're able to bring some more funding to the table on that. We've used federal funding for meat processing, increasing our meat processing program and dairy processing, and now the state has picked up on that. And there's hardly a processor in the state that has not put their, improve their game in that. On the high end, research hubs at University of Wisconsin system, both in some of the outlying areas, but in Madison also has been extraordinarily important. Farm tourism is a big deal. Tourism is a big deal in Wisconsin. Farm tourism is extraordinarily important. And so, are people struggling? Absolutely. One of the things that, as a governor, that I've really watched is and participated in producer-led watershed groups all across. Every county has them, and it's run by farmers. They're in charge, and they're doing a great job in making sure their soil and water is clean and useful all across the state. And they're really working also with our areas of recreation areas where people are not doing what they should be doing around our lakes, and the farmers are actually pushing that part. They're taking over this whole issue of watershed. So all that's good, but I'm really hopeful when we ever do get to a point where our farm bill is passed that the SNAP program is really important. I'll tell you, you see people not doing well in the area of consumption of food, and two things I'll give examples of. If there's any way, and I see it, in fact, just before I left, there was a whole series of things on TV about college kids and their inability to provide to eat and to have healthy food. And how about changing the SNAP program to include college students who qualify, obviously, in a way that's fair. And, maybe if they qualify for work study, they would qualify for SNAP, for example. And so I just think there's lots of things if we ever get to that point of having a farm bill, that we look at the SNAP program and some of the other areas where people struggle to have enough food. I mean, our food banks in Wisconsin, since in the last year, I would say they've increased their need by almost 100%. Almost 100% since the end of the pandemic. And so there's a need, and whatever we can do through the farm bill to meet that need, I think is critically important.
I think what you say is so deep and really important about the SNAP programs. One of my things that I would love to see happen is for the SNAP program to run like how the WIC program runs, so that you can only buy certain types of food, thereby steering what we eat and changing the way we eat, especially for our people that live below the poverty line. Because I don't know if any of you ever go to the store on the first of the month, but I guess in the mainland you live in larger communities where you don't really have the mix, because you could shop in an exclusively middle class neighborhood. But in the Virgin Islands, everybody goes to the same grocery store. So the first of the month, when you look at what people have in their carts, it's not green leafy vegetables and good stuff. It's TV dinners and popsicles and a lot of pork and fatty foods, a lot of starches. Trying to change that also, it will do our nations good. It's like all these things intersect, because it leans right over into the healthcare sector, where we see in minorities, especially people living in urban areas, suffering from hypertension, diabetes, obesity. All this stuff feeds into it. So excellent comments, Governor Kopech.
Thank you, Governor Bryan and Governor Little. Thank you, and to our guests. I'm just going to run through a couple items in the interest of time. On the SNAP program, it was really great to see in the pandemic the movement to the different meal plan, because I think it put more money in people's pockets so they could purchase healthier food. So keep going up the meal plan. The low-level one just doesn't cut it. Really excited about summer EBT. It would be helpful to, and I know this is Congress's fault, but the law has made it, in the interest of accountability, the administrative burden on our schools to run summer EBT is challenging. We've relayed that. I'm going to say it again. We're going to simplify as much as we can, but it is challenging. I'm a big believer in category eligibility under SNAP, so throw the college kids in there. That would be great. Really want to say thank you to USDA for the rural housing work you're doing. Very important. I visited all 36 counties in Oregon last year. Housing is a huge issue, urban, suburban, rural, very difficult. We need to maximize use of that program. This is just the one item I want to throw out. So I think as we experience climate change, having the programs for disasters was somewhat built in a different time. We still have weather disasters, and the vagaries of being in the ag sector is very difficult. But when we see certain types of food products, because of the impacts of climate change, if you have a state south of another state whose market has been disrupted because of climate, that disruption goes up geographically, and then we have disruption in price and ability to survive in the market. And there's really not a mechanism. To me, that's a disaster, but it's not the typical disaster. And so we're all being like, well, what do we do for these folks, right? Their crops are impacted not only by the weather, but also the price variations as a result of climate because of the different seasons. So we just have to get more creative, I think, in making sure our farmers can be there as climate changes. So thank you. Appreciate it.
We were glad to be, we were one of the early states to implement summer EBT, and we appreciated working the department on that. Colorado has a thriving ag economy. Our efforts have generally been focused on expanding market access, and one of the areas that I hope matriculates up through the administration is to have a more proactive trade agenda around growing in Colorado, growing in America products. We did celebrate a victory recently with Mexico, where potatoes, as Governor Little knows. So previously, potato exports had been restricted to within 50 miles of the Mexican border with America, which is not where the big market is. Now we're able to export potatoes to Mexico City and other population centers. From the San Luis Valley. Many people know Idaho for potatoes, but the San Luis Valley of Colorado is also a top potato producer. But I think leaning into these kinds of opportunities for American farmers and ranchers is very important work, and it's not talked about enough in trade circles, and it's something that we'd like to add our voice to.
Thank you, Governor Polis. So much to discuss on the agriculture. Sometimes I wonder how USDA does it, even housing opportunities. But it definitely shows and demonstrates how all of this intersects. And I think one of the themes about this is our farm bill needs to be diverse, and it needs to address a lot. I love what you said, Governor Kotek, about being prepared for that disaster and not having those food chains. It was, during COVID, I especially watched, I remember particularly the Tyson chicken factories were shutting down. And it was like, all of a sudden, it hit me because I was thinking on that macro level, like, once these things start to shut down, how are people going to eat? And so you had to risk life and limb and go out there in COVID. The next time and there's going to be a next time, it could be something worse than this. So we do have to figure out systems around how do we get supplies to people. And one of the ways to do that is to connect regional farming so that they can have access to markets, so that they know how to aggregate, so they know how to package well, and so they know where the customer is. We have an incredible demand for food that's not being met, and less people thinking about farming. That's a scary situation for me, especially in a place where you're literally marooned on an island. So I really want to thank all the panelists today for their contributions and the continued work on this as we move forward. So I'll close out, and Governor Little, I'll give the floor to you.
Well, thank you, Governor. We should never forget that this country feeds a big proportion of the world, and we've done it with that basically how we adopt a change. Technology, some of the new genetics, we're going to have that consume less energy, that consume less water, that require less pesticides and herbicides. We got to be careful that we don't choke the goose that laid the golden egg, that innovative, most often family farm model, that's successful. We got to have an infrastructure. We got to have roads to get our commodities around, and we need to have that commodity production diversified enough so if you have a disruption, the market can tolerate it. But, you know, as I said earlier, profit is a pretty good motivator for farmers to do the right thing. And a big profit is a motivator for them to overproduce. I've been a victim of that many times in my life. Best way to get too much milk is have $22 milk. The best way to have too many cattle is to have a high price for cattle. And so the USDA often serves as a shock absorber for prices to make sure that people can stay in the business, and then the market will take care of that overproduction. Governor Polis talked about potatoes. I just happened to do a trade mission with a significant number of potato producers in a time we had a big surplus of potatoes. We were very thankful that the U.S. government and the Mexican government got rid of that artificial trade barrier, because we got rid of a lot of potatoes in our trade mission. But don't forget how we got here. Don't forget what it was, what we've done. And a lot of it is technology, genetics, chemistry, and we got to realize that the world's going to continue to change, and we don't want to get in the way of our agricultural commodities adopting to that change and continuing to feed the world and provide great jobs and opportunities for America and the open space that everybody dearly appreciates about this country. So I believe with that, we're 33 seconds ahead of schedule. Thank you all very much.